Hello, hello everybody. It's Mrs. Wisniewski this time, and today we're going to be working on solving a quadratic using the quadratic formula. This is review. We've done this before. I'm going to go through a couple of examples. Before I get started, I want to make sure that you watch the first video that we sent in the assignment on, it's just a little song on the quadratic formula. Example number 1, I suggest just writing this on lined paper for now. We have x squared minus 12x plus 27 equals 0. And we are going to use the quadratic formula to solve this, which I do have included over here on the right. Notice the a, b, and c, which we need to identify from our equation. So a little refresher, you do need to know the general equation of a quadratic. Ta-da! So 2 things to note. It has to be set equal to 0. And notice how I color-coded my a, b, and c. So the a is in front of the x squared, the b is in front of the x, and the c is the constant all by itself. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to my equation and I'm going to identify my a. Well, it's the number in front of x. I don't see anything, so it's going to be a 1. Then I'm going to identify my b, which is here, and that's a negative 12. And then I'm going to identify my c, which is the constant by itself, and that's 27. Once you have that done, you're now going to plug it into the quadratic formula. And remember that every single thing that we plug in, we're going to put parentheses around it to eliminate any problems with the negatives. So I am just going to copy down the equation, but instead of the b, I'm now going to put in what I have for b. The first time around, I'm going to color code it all for you. So I have a negative 12 that I'm plugging in there, plus or minus the square root. And now I'm plugging in another b. The parentheses are very important right here, especially when you're squaring a negative. Minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 27, all over 2 times my a, which is 1. Now, the next thing that we did was we started to simplify. So x equals a negative 12 is a positive 12, plus or minus, and then this entire thing under the square root you can put in your calculator. So take a second, put that in, and see what you get. I got 20. Hopefully you did too. Now, if you notice, 20 is not a perfect square, and this is why you were working on this last week as a little review. So I need to simplify that 20. I need to find a perfect square that goes into it evenly. So off to the side, I'm going to list my perfect squares, and I'm going to start dividing that 20 by the largest one that could possibly go into it, which would be 16. When I divide it by 16, I get a decimal, so it's not 16. When I divide it by 9, I get a decimal, so it's not 9. But when I divide it by 4, I get a nice whole number of 5 because 4 times 5 is 20. So that is what it's going to be. So I'm going to rewrite it as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5 all over 20. So the next thing that I'm going to do is take the square root of my 4, which was the whole point in doing this really. So x equals 12 plus or minus, the square root of 4 is 2, radical 5 all over 2. Almost done. So now I'm going to divide this 2 into both terms. So this is a term and this whole thing is a term, but the 2 cannot go into the radical. It's only going to go into the 2. So basically I'm dividing the 2 into the 12 and the 2. So I get 6 plus or minus 1 radical 5. Now it's up to you. You can get rid of that 1 in front because it's 1 times the square root of 5, which is just the square root of 5. Either one of these is acceptable. So on number 2, I hope that you notice that this quadratic is not set equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract this 66 from both sides. And I'm going to put it under the 7 because that's a like term. And I'm going to add the x to both sides, and I'm going to put it under this x because that's a like term. So the whole point is, so the right side is equal to 0, and the left side becomes x squared. 7x plus x is 8x, and 7 minus 66 is negative 59. Now I'm going to identify my a, b, and c. A is 1, b is 8, c is negative 59. Now I'm going to plug in. X equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 59, and I'm going to just extend this here, all over 2 times 1. Now I'm going to start simplifying, so negative 8 plus or minus, and take a second, put this part that is underneath the radical in your calculator. Do not put the square root button. I'm hoping that you got 300 under your radical. If not, please go back and check. So remember our list of perfect squares. You're going to start dividing, start as high as you possibly can. You're going to work your way down the list from greatest to least. That way you'll be sure to catch the largest one possible. For the sake of time and not making a long video, I'm going to tell you right now that it's 100. When I divided 300 by 100, I got a whole number of 3. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 100 times the square root of 3 all over 2. And now I'm going to take the square root of 100, which is the whole point in doing it, which is 10. Keep the rad 3. And now the 2 goes into there and there. So I have negative 4 plus or minus 5 rad 3. And that is your final answer. All right, take a look at number 3. I'm hoping that the first thing that you notice is that it's not set equal to 0. So I'm going to get rid of that negative 2. Because it's negative 2, the opposite of that would be to add 2 to both sides. And I get x squared plus 2x. Negative 50 plus 2 is negative 48 equals 0. I'm going to identify my a, b, and c. I'm going to do that off to the right this time to save space. So my a is 1, my b is 2, and my c is negative 48. And now I'm going to plug in with all my parentheses. Okay, take a second, make sure that makes sense to you, make sure that's what you got. And what I'm going to do next is simplify what's under my square root. So I want you to take a second, pause the video, and do that yourself. And I got 196. Hopefully you did too. If you didn't, please go back and fix it. Now, I'm noticing something very special about 196. If you look at your list of perfect squares, 196 is a perfect square, so we don't need to find what goes into it evenly. What we need to do is just simplify it. So I'm going to take the square root of 196. X equals -2 plus or minus, well, the square root of 196 is 14. You can use your calculator if you need to, divide by 2. I'm actually going to be consistent here and do what I did on the last two problems and divide 2 into both of those terms. So I have -1 plus or minus 7. Now, what do I do from there? I can simplify that further because I don't have a square root. So I'm going to separate the plus and the minus. So I have -1 plus 7 and -1 minus 7. So in your calculators, you're going to figure that out, and you should get a 6 and a -8. So your final answer is 6 and -8. They're nice, neat whole numbers, and part of the reason for that is because this 196 was a perfect square. All right, guys, one more question, and then we're done. All right, guys, question number 4. Hopefully you notice that it's already set equal to 0. So I'm going to identify my A, B, and C off to the right. So my A is 1, my B is 16, my C is 46. I am now going to plug everything in to the formula. So please pause if you want to do that ahead and see if you got it right. Otherwise, do it along with me. And next, I'm going to start simplifying. So I have a -16, and I'm going to simplify what is under that square root, and I get 72 all over 2. Now, 72 is not a perfect square, so I need to find the largest perfect square that's going to go into that 72. So refer to your list, start dividing, and start high, work your way down. I would start with 64 because that's the largest one that could possibly go into it. And you work your way down the list till you find a whole number. I'm going to give you a second to do that. Okay, please pause if you haven't found it yet. And if you have, I hope that you found 36 and 2, because 36 times 2 is 72. So now I'm going to take the square root of 36, which is 6. And now I'm going to divide the 2 into both my terms, just like we've been doing. So I have -8 plus or minus 3 rad 2. Now remember, just a quick little reminder, the 2, since it's already going into the 6, you don't and you can't divide it into the square root of 2. You cannot divide in like that with a radical. It's not possible. So once I get this, this is my final answer. I'm happy with it. It looks good. Hopefully all you are feeling comfortable with this as well. All right, everybody, that is it. I hope that was helpful. Please feel free to rewind it, watch it again, practice it again. You have an additional assignment that is very similar to this. Please make sure you do it. Rewatch the video if you have questions, then reach out to us. I hope everybody's having a good day, and hopefully we will see you guys soon.